Yes, so thank you, Dr. Johnson, for inviting me. Again, my name is Cesar Vera Rodriguez. I'm a former student of Dr. Johnson at WC Tri-Cities many years ago. And so I've been with Pasco School District, started as a bilingual paraeducator 13 years ago, and worked my way up here going to being a fifth grade bilingual teacher for many years, and then was able to do some behavior interventions for our school at Rowena Chess Elementary here in Pasco. And 2 years ago, moved over here at district office as I was invited to continue to provide support and expand our program here as the dual language coordinator for our district. And so it's been a great pleasure to be able to work with Mrs. Alma Duran, our director of special programs here, and continue to be able to show and present to our parents what the goals of dual language are really, and how they can continue to be involved in their own child's education in a way that continues to impact their future, right? And so this is what we are all about here at Pasco School District. So, Dr. Johnson, can I share my screen? Is
You
that
should be able
enabled?
to. Yeah, I have
Okay.
it. I think I have it enabled for everybody.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to share with you is I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint presentation that we share with our families anytime we either go to a school building or we host a session at a school that we are currently actually getting ready for, what we call a after the lottery process. And I'll go a little bit deeper into what that means, and why we feel as a district, in order to keep our dual language program fair and equitable for all of our community members at every school, we do a lottery, and it's also been a recommendation from Cal, the Center for Applied Linguistics, that is something that we do here in our the vast community that we have here, and how the different and depending on parts of Pasco that we are either in West Pasco, Central, or East Pasco, the interest varies, right? And it also varies on the demographics of whatever part of Pasco we are in. And so again, in order to hold that and keep that equitable in our community, we do a lottery into two-way dual language education here. So I'm going to share with you this PowerPoint and we'll go a little bit deeper into what and why we do it with our parents. So let me just share here quickly. And if you guys can give me a thumbs up if you can see this.
Yep.
Got it? Okay. So when we invite parents, we just not going for me. Let me see. Let me just stop sharing really quick.
Is it like the Google Slides?
No, it's on the OneDrive that we use, and it just kind of froze up on me as I went from one slide to the next. So let me
So while he's doing that,
reload that.
every summer they hold these info meetings for incoming families to outline, the program details and explain how the lottery works and all that.
Yes.
So
Yes. So as this is loading again, I apologize. So as we're getting ready for this, so what we do is in March, we send out a application, a general application with some basic info for parents to fill out, like name of the student, first and last name, date of birth.
I can actually show them that while you're downloading.
Yes.
And I put the link to this page on our Padlet. So it's just their dual language info page. And then they accept these applications, right? So you can pop it in and it explains all the schools, and then the parents have to fill out all the information. Then this goes into a lottery system. That's depends on whether they classify for EL services or not. And we filled the same thing out. So click here to submit, download so you can do a paper application as well. And then he'll talk about the brochures. And those are right here. So if you look at our Padlet under May 8th, that would be, here's the website, here are the brochures. So we can use some of those as guidance as we move forward.
Yes, and so I attached those brochures and all, sorry, I apologize. I don't know, I don't know why it's not loading, the OneDrive. Let me try it one more time. Thank you for being patient.
So I'll just give from my perspective as a parent. It was my daughter entered right as Pasco did their big expansion, and I didn't even know that the dual language program was at the school, our actual zone school. And so I was like, hey, can I apply to go to another school? Don't worry about transportation. I'll take her. And Alma was like, no, we just started it at Columbia River. And so that was super exciting. But then it's also, it can be nerve wracking because it's a lottery system and you don't know what if you're going to get chosen or whatever. So yeah, it is definitely a very tense time when, as a parent who really wants it, but also having an understanding of why kids are selected is important. So it used to be based on testing, and so I don't know, you'll get into that stuff.
Yes.
And so it turned into kind of an elitist program, but
right. And it was a magnet program where, yes, there was testing involved, where students had to be tested to get into the program, right? But as far as, so we follow the research, and the research shows that that is not best practice now currently. Can you guys see the slides?
No, switch to your others. Can we see the folder with the hard copy?
Let me try one more time. How about now? Can you guys see that now?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
there we go. Okay. So yes, and we'll talk about that here. So we have, parents, they sign in, and then we go over an agenda of what we will cover. We will cover the eligibility of how they can be, or how they can go into two-way or dual language in our district. Then we go over the goals. What are the goals of our program? And then what is different about being in a dual language classroom, and what are some opportunities for parents to be involved, and how can they continue to have a homeschool connection? And so what we do is then when we start is with a general overview of what our one-way and two-way dual language program is, and just the difference of what that looks like in a classroom. So we describe to our parents that in a one-way model, we have the majority, or all of, sorry, the students in this classroom are Spanish speakers, let's say, or Spanish dominant speakers, right? They still come in with different vary levels of Spanish acquisition, but for the most part, they're all Spanish dominant speakers. And so they are receiving Spanish instruction from their teacher, but also English instruction as well from the teacher, right? So that is what a one-way classroom, dual language classroom looks like. And then a two-way dual language classroom is just the makeup of the class changes, right? Well, we can have half of the class be Spanish dominant speaking and the other half of the class be English dominant speaking. They're still receiving instruction in both languages from their teacher as the model of the language. The teacher is modeling the language of Spanish and English. And then we also continue to have our two-way dual language program classrooms, where research still shows that it is still a success if we have a third of the classroom, maybe, as depending on the interest from different parts of our of Pasco, where we don't have as many English dominant speaking students, and I'll say like in East and Central Pasco as opposed to West Pasco. And so if a third of the class is still considered English dominant speaking, we still want to keep all those students together in one class, and there'd still be a two-way dual language classroom. And again, these students, the reason why we want to keep them together is so that they can continue to support each other, and as they continue to acquire the Spanish language. And so again, the teacher is still the model of the language of both English and Spanish in this case, or even in our Russian one-way dual language program that we have. We also go and share with parents where currently we have all of our dual language schools, which schools currently we offer two-way dual language education and one-way. Again, I want to re-emphasize, and we re-emphasize to parents that there's the only difference between one-way and two-way is just the makeup of the classroom. Everything that students learn, content-wise and time allocations, is exactly the same. They use the exact same materials, and they use the exact same time allocations. We're an 80-20 model, and I'll go a little bit deeper into what that is and what that looks like. what that looks like as they progress throughout the years. And so we show them a map of where in Pasco maybe their school is, and if they offer maybe two-way or one-way at their school. Please, and if you guys have any questions along the way, please feel free and stop me. And
What,
so,
say, so I
yes.
got, what kind of questions do parents ask when you're rolling this information out?
So yes, good question. So one of the questions, and again, that's why I re-emphasized it, is when we are explaining to them the differences of just the makeup of the classroom, they might ask questions that are the students learning something different as opposed to being in a one-way or two-way classroom, right? And so we re-emphasize that they are not that they are learning the exact same thing. The content is the exact same, the materials are the exact same, and the time allocations are the exact same that teachers in one-way and two-way classrooms follow. And that is a non-negotiable in our district. And so those are some of the questions that do come up is, are they learning something different in either one of those classrooms? And we re-emphasize that it's just the makeup of the classroom that's different.
Cool.
Yes. Good questions. And then we go again and we show them how we started our journey here in Pasco in 2004 with Maya Angelou being the very first dual language school in 2004. And then we show them who the current administrators are at their school, just in case if they haven't met or haven't put a face to who their administrator is or their building principal is, as they are getting ready to register their students for kindergarten. They know who the administrator is at every building. And we go through how we have expanded the program throughout our years and how we started back. It took almost 10 years for us to expand to another elementary school in McClintock STEM Elementary in 2014. And then how we have continued to expand every year after that. And in 2019, how we expanded to 4 more elementaries. And then we continue in every elementary where we currently have a two-way dual language program model now.
And then do you have another question?
Yes.
So at each dual language school, but whichever program, right, or model,
Right.
that one of the administrators will be able to speak the either Spanish or Russian, right?
Yes.
And so it's not all that principals do, but within the assistant principal or vice principal.
Yes. So the goal is here in Pasco is that there will be, and it's pretty close to being fact that now almost every elementary school will have either a bilingual principal or vice principal, and that is the goal that they continue to work on every year, just so that we continue to expand our program, that we feel that it is in order for us to continue to support parents or our community that's around each building, each school, that there should be somebody who can provide that language support for parents as they continue to have questions about maybe what things that are happening at school, right? Things that students are learning in class, that they feel that they are being supported in that as well. So that is our goal, that in looking at all these schools, actually, there are only, there is one.
So
Two.
Columbia River, that's my
Columbia River,
daughters, they
yes.
don't, but they have
Yes.
support staff who are, so.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. But the goal is that at least one vice principal or principal at every building will be bilingual. Yes, good question. So what are the requirements for participating? So they're pretty simple. One of them is that they have to be a resident in Pasco. We do make exceptions for Pasco employees who maybe aren't residents of Pasco. But that is on a case by case scenario, where if there is room in that school, then if they are a Pasco employee, they would be considered, where they can file an exempt if there is room in the school and in the program. So there are exceptions for that if they're a Pasco employee that live outside of Pasco. They have to be 5 years of age by August 31st of the school year if they wish to participate. They have to be ready to enroll in kindergarten for the first time here in Pasco. And we just ask that parents, stay actively, or they participate actively in the program, and and then we go into a little deeper into what that can look like. And then we also ask that there's a minimum of a 6-year commitment, at least K-5, right? And the reason why we do that is because we want parents, and we ask parents that, and I'll share with you a little bit later on, that research shows us that it can take between 5 to 7 years for a student to finally get comfortable with that second language acquisition. And that's what research shows us. And that's why we ask for at least a minimum of a 6-year commitment so that they can see the fruits of that labor, right? So that they can finally start to see that, yes, my daughter or my son are at a place now comfortably where they are languaging in the other partner language as well. And that is what we ask of our parents. Now, we do have, and we tell parents this, that there are special situations, again, a case-by-case basis where, let's say that a student is really struggling academically in the program. And then we ask for there to be a meeting, right, between a classroom teacher, the interventionist that maybe is receiving support or that is providing support for that student, the school psychologist or the counselor, to make a very well educated decision or what is best for the student. If maybe there's just way too much anxiety happening, or there are maybe other external factors that are affecting the students' academics, where if we feel that it's in their best interest to pull them out of the program, then that'll be a decision made as a group with parents, school principal, again, like I said, counselor, school psychologist, or interventionist, or even any classroom teacher. And there have been cases that have occurred in the past where
So how does it say, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
you've got a situation where the students facing significant academic challenges, right?
Right.
And so then you bring in the team, do an evaluation, make a recommendation. That's one way to go. What about if the parents are like, no, I don't think that my son or daughter is learning whatever, I want to pull them out. Do you still bring the team and sit down with the family and talk about these things?
Yes, we do, because we want to provide evidence to show that there is growth happening. Because what we want is just, at the end of the day, it's the parents' right to either have the students stay or not participate in the program. But we want to do our due diligence to provide all the information as best as possible and the evidence that the student is making growth, so that they make the best educated decision for their child, right? And that's our goal, if we find ourselves in situations like that. So yes, we would still meet, gather, we provided the parent concern, and we pull in all the evidence to show what gains the student is making in both languages so that we can provide it to the parents and then they can make that determination or that.
So can I show an example, Cesar?
Yes.
Janelle appreciate this because we just did it this weekend in our practice sessions for the endorsement.
I'll stop. You want me to stop sharing? I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, stop sharing for a minute. Session 6. So this is going to happen where you get, so this is my daughter. Okay, I'm hoping you can see this. So she gets her WIDA access and they're looking, so this is the language proficiency stuff that, I mean, you guys do it anyways, right? So all of a sudden it looks like, oh my gosh, my daughter's not progressing in reading and writing in English. I'm getting scared. And then this is the STAR test. And it's like, okay, she's doing, you know, about average in Spanish reading, but oh my God, in English, she's so far behind. She can't read in English. Or math. Okay, in Spanish, but oh my God, in English, she can't do math. So these are things that parents are going to come to us with, and I'm sure they do you. So yeah. How do you unpack those kind of scores when parents get nervous about those English marks?
Yes, a great question. So we have what we call a biliteracy trajectory here in Pasco. And we have one for reading and we have one for math. And so what that means is we take what Dr. Johnson just showed you, where they fall with the rest of their peers in English and where they fall with the rest of their peers in Spanish. And there has been work that we've done here in our district to create a biliteracy trajectory that shows whether the student is actually not needing interventions just yet because of the unique situation that the student is in of learning 2 languages or being in a dual language setting as opposed to being in an English or in a mainstream classroom. And so that trajectory is very important because that is what we use to assess ourselves, and also dual language teachers use to assess themselves and their students of whether those students are actually within that trajectory of a healthy trajectory, right? that we can now show to parents and say, look, this is where they fall on the trajectory or the biliteracy trajectory. That yes, we understand your concern, but actually, if we take into consideration the unique setting that your child is in, they're just in line, right? They're right where they need to be. And so we do use that, and it's important that as a district, we develop that with also with work, and maybe some of you have already heard of Dr. Jose Medina, that he's been collaborating with us as a district in developing a biliteracy trajectory that we can also rely on. So when we have to make those decisions, whether students actually need academic intervention or not, or it's just a language issue, which also helps.
Yeah, I mean, so like with the math score, my daughter's like 84th percentile or whatever in Spanish. I don't care. She probably just didn't want to test anymore in English, but she knows the concepts.
Exactly, and all of that
So,
transfers, and all of
mhm,
that transfers. What the student knows in one language knows in the other. And so, and I'll go over when we get deeper into our program model, there's bridging that has to take place in a dual language setting. That's a must, right? We know that when a student is receiving instruction in a content area in just one language, there has to be that time and support where the teacher is creating that environment that the students are bridging what they learned in one language to the other, because research shows us that if we can create that environment, what they know in one language, they know in the other, especially in, like, let's say in math, where maybe she received math just in Spanish this year, right? It's important that they have those bridging moments at the end of a unit so that they can transfer what they learned in Spanish into English. And
yeah, and
then,
then the teacher does a good job of connecting that, like with, they'll do science and English sometimes, and so they'll
yeah,
connect the math concepts, and yeah,
it's very, very important, very, very important that that happens.
I'd like to see the trajectory, the biliteracy trajectory model you guys use. Not right now, obviously,
Yeah,
but
we can definitely
yeah,
share that with you.
that's awesome stuff.
Okay, so let me go back and I'll share my screen. Okay. So then we go over how does the lottery work? And so in order to determine the number of English speaking students that we can have in our two-way dual language program, to select from the lottery list, we first need to determine the number of Spanish speaking students that are actually being registered at every school. And the reason why I say that is because research shows us that in order for the program to be successful, we have to have try to keep a good balance of a classroom in dominant Spanish speaking students and dominant English speaking students, right? We can even go to as low as a third of English speaking students in a classroom to still be considered a two-way classroom. And so that is why we have to do a lottery, because in the west side of Pasco, we have way more interest from our English dominant speaking families than we do our Spanish speaking. Then we have the opposite happening in our central and east side of Pasco, where we have more Spanish speaking dominant families than as opposed to English speaking. And so in order to keep it fair and equitable amongst our entire community, that is why we need a lottery. Any questions with that? I can also, how do we do the lottery? So we intake forms starting in March from only our English speaking families. And the reason why we only do our English speaking families is because when our Spanish speaking families register their students for kindergarten and they put on that home language survey that Spanish is the first language being spoken in the home, they will automatically be tested with the WIDA screener that Dr. Johnson shared a little earlier. And more than likely, they will qualify as a multilingual learner. If they qualify as a multilingual learner, they automatically get into dual language here in our district, because that is our core instructional model that we use for any multilingual learner in our district. So they automatically get in. So that is why the lottery is only held for our English speaking families. Does that make sense?
So say what I'm interested in, you might not know the answer to this bit. So my daughter's first language, she was exposed to my mother-in-law, and right, who speaks Portuguese. So her initial language was Portuguese, and she got flagged as a multilingual learner and had to go through the testing and all that. How does that factor into the way that the classes are are composed, right? Does she count as an English speaker or a Spanish speaker? Like, have you had a lot of those cases?
Not a whole lot, but she would be considered a multilingual learner in general. So
Okay.
she would take up a spot with with the rest of the Spanish speakers. She wouldn't
Okay.
be if she qualified as a multilingual learner, we would put her in with that section of students.
Okay.
We wouldn't consider her um even if she has already some level or some acquisition in English, and depending on what that levels look like, we still wouldn't consider her. We're trying to get away from the words English and Spanish models. Why? Because they all come with varying levels of English and Spanish, right?
Right.
And so that is something that we're working on this year, and changing our vocabulary into just either English speaking or dominance or Spanish dominant speaking, because we have so many simultaneous bilinguals now coming into our district. So, but yes, to answer that question, she would actually be Dr. Johnson with that section of students or pot of students that are multilingual learners, which could be, even Russian, our Russian and Ukrainian students, our Spanish speaking students, and in her case, Portuguese. So yes.
Cool.
Any questions with it? So then what we do is we use a system here in our computer programming that runs a generated random sort of list, and we do that for every site, every building. And then what we do is then we reach out to we reach out to building principals, and we share with them those lists of those students that made it in the lottery. And then and I myself and communicate with parents whether they made it in the program through the lottery or not. And then if they did, then we share the dates of the info sessions that we have throughout the summer for them to come and receive this presentation of what they can expect when their son or daughter enters the program. If they did not make the lottery, we also have a communication letter that goes out to them with some follow-up steps to follow. Some of those steps are that we have a wait list at every site. If there's more interest than spots available, we have a wait list. We also let parents know that they can be on that wait list at their regional site school all the way up to first grade or middle of first grade. So January 31st of their first grade, because research shows us that when students enter the program, before that, they can still be successful. Anything after that, there's just research, there isn't enough research to show that they can be as successful as the rest of their peers in acquiring that second language. And so that is I guess the rule that we have here in our district. If they don't make it in the lottery, for them to be able to enter the program halfway of their first grade year. That's the cutoff.
So halfway through.
Yes, of their first grade year. If they've never entered the program, that's when they can enter. And again, this is for our English dominant speaking students. We also have because of the unique situation that we're in our Central and East Pasco sites, where we've determined either depending on the enrollment of each of those schools, typically it's been Captain Gray STEM Elementary and Whittier, where we have extra slots available for our English dominant speaking families, where we provide that as an option if they don't want to be put on a wait list. The only caveat to that is they have to provide the transportation. Like you were mentioning earlier, Dr. Johnson, where maybe they live in the Maya Angelou boundary, but they could drive their student and be in the program at a Captain Gray Elementary per se. And then if a slot opens up in their boundary school, then they can shift back into the program in their boundary school, maybe after first grade, like second or third, when generally the amount of students that can be in those classrooms expand a little bit more. So there's a little bit more room.
Okay.
Questions? So what do we talk about next? We talk a little bit about the research behind, why it can take up to between 5 to 7 years for students to start, either scoring or outperforming the rest of their monolingual peers. And we talk about the different program structures that we've used here in the past in Pasco, and why research continues to show that dual language education continues to be the best form of education for our multilingual learners and any other student who wants to acquire a second language. And so we, again, talk about the research as background, as context for them to be able to understand why they are excited about going into dual language. So we talk about that as well. Just some key points. We can go into the weeds of the rest of what research can show, but we want to keep it brief and simple for our parents to be able to understand. And then we go into the goals of dual language, the 3 pillars of dual language, right? Of being bilingual, biliterate, and what that means, the high academic or high grade level academic achievement, and that social cultural competence. And so we also talk to our parents about what we are doing as a district and providing professional development for all of our dual language teachers so that they can achieve these goals within their own students. And that, being bilingual isn't just being able to speak and be able to understand another language, but it's also being able to write and read the both languages in a high academic context, right? But also having that meta-linguistic awareness of being able to understand how both languages connect and how are they different. And so that's also a huge goal of ours that is in that first pillar. And then just having that social cultural competence of being able to have our teachers understand how that language is acquired is different, right? Is different in both languages, especially in English and Spanish. So we providing that professional development of being able to set language objectives and cultural objectives in our classrooms is very important. And that's something that we continue to work on with Dr. Jose Medina and Cal as well.
And so how does he recommend explaining all that stuff so that it's easily digestible? I'm just thinking of regular parents. And when you start talking about meta-linguistic awareness and, sociocultural competence, and that can be super confusing.
Yes. So what we talk about in the first pillar is we do a 4+1, right? The 4 language domains: English speaking, reading and writing. And when we say the +1, we talk about the meta-linguistic, and what we mean by that. And when we share with parents is we use gestures, right? And saying meta is we got to think about it, and linguistic is in the form of both languages, English and Spanish, because that's what they're being exposed to, or Russian. And then being able to just connect them and how are they different and how are they the same. And so it's providing that environment. And that's what we share with parents. That's what being fully bilingual and biliterate is. And then the social cultural competence piece is also being able to understand that, when we talk about that pillar is that having an attitude of, we understand that we all maybe come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and that it's our job as educators and teachers to create an environment where they are learning how to get along with each other, and they are learning that, it's okay to think differently, right? That we all come from a different background or different perspectives. And that's what we share with parents, to be able to simplify specifically those 2 pillars. Good question. So we then go into what is different about being in a 2-way language class. That it's a language enrichment program where students think, read, write, speak in 2 different languages. Sorry, that the makeup of the students is unique, right? We've talked about a little bit about that. And it's also based on site. So depending on, school, some schools are still practicing where they're flipping, and and that might be a consideration, I think, for Finley, right? Where they might have to flip teachers, but we don't usually see that until 3rd grade here in Pasco because by 3rd grade now it's a 50-50 model, so now they can switch. And we'll get into the time allocations here soon. Where that is saying that the one teacher will provide the Spanish instruction, and then the other teacher will provide the English instruction, and then halfway through the day they'll switch, and then they'll do the same for the other class. Teacher stays in code based on the language of instruction, and that is something that we recommend. Now, we don't say, and we've gone away because research also shows us that it's okay to let students know that you are bilingual as well, and that you can speak in both languages. And so many years ago when we started, it was frowned upon to let students know that you spoke English, right? If it was a kindergarten teacher teaching just Spanish, they can't know because then they're not going to want to practice Spanish. But research shows us that actually it's better for them to see a model of, in this case, the teacher languaging in both. And that's the ultimate goal, and that they can do that as well. Now, if a student responds, let's say we are and we're teaching, it's math, and the language of instruction in math is Spanish. And we have a student who answers a question in English, we're not going to tell the student no. We're not going to, you know, not accept that answer. We're going to say yes, and then we're going to have the student be able to practice what he just shared in English and Spanish, right? Maybe together as a class, and make the student feel comfortable that it's okay that he answered in English, but the goal is that we'll continue to practice your Spanish because that's the time that we're in Spanish. And then literacy is taught in Spanish K-12. That is our goal, that reading and writing will be taught in both program languages all the way until they graduate high school. And then we share that there is considerable research, right, that demonstrates that a strong first language can serve as an important foundation for the second language. And we use that straight out of our guiding principles book, which I know you guys have been working with as well. And then we go into the program model. And again, looking back at that last quote, why we felt that here in our district, we felt that we needed an 80-20 model. Again, we have the capacity to do that, right? With the vast amount of schools that we have, and teachers that we are able to hire, and we still need more teachers. But we started an 80-20 model, which means 80% of your day is in Spanish, and 20% of your day is in English. Again, for that really strong foundation in the first language, in this case being Espanol, Spanish, kinder and first grade stays that way. Then you can see how they progress throughout the rest of the grade levels. In second is 70-30. And then from third grade and on is 50-50 all the way to high school, all the way until they graduate high school. So some of the questions that parents ask, and we didn't used to involve this in our previous presentations, is, well, what are they learning in both languages? So then, because most of our parents are first-time parents that are having a kinder come up in the program, we share with them the dual language instructional framework that we've created here as a district, and taking into consideration the program or the time allocations, right? Starting at kinder and first, 80-20, in both Spanish and Russian instruction, and then what they will learn in English. So what that 80% of their day consists of in Spanish at kinder will be SLA, so language arts and Spanish, math, science, and social studies, and what that 20% of their day will look like, where they will receive 30 minutes of ELD instruction or English language arts, and then that 20% also involves their specials, so like art, music, PE, and technology. And the reason why we do that is because we don't have the capacity right now. Our goal is that maybe in the future we can, to provide those specials and also in Spanish. And see if we can switch another content area in English. But that is why you see specials, K-2 and all the way through their elementary years will always be part of their English instructional time or minutes. And then what we've done is we started to point your attention to, we started to alternate content so that we can try and keep it as fair and equitable as possible, with also providing professional development to teachers and how to bridge, because that's very important, especially if they're only learning one content throughout the entire year in one specific language. Like, for example, in this case, social studies in first grade is still being taught in Spanish, but because of the time allocations, as they increase in English, now social studies will be taught in English in second grade. And then once they go into third grade, social studies will be now taught back again in Spanish. And we'll do that with every content area all the way through. That is our goal. Any questions with that? And we also share that with parents so that they have some understanding of, when they look at these time allocations or percentages, they understand what it is that they're learning exactly in those two languages. Questions? Okay.
But I'm wondering about teachers who, because I mean, the whole district, there are a bunch of specialists, right, who speak Spanish. And so I'm wondering to what extent they do those strategies to get kids engaged, or let the kids know if they have a question, they can ask them. And instead of like the fidelity model of, no, you have to speak English. So I know that's not anything you you note down, but that's interesting that those are indicated as all English.
Yes, now we do encourage, right? Because we can't make anything, obligatory, but we do encourage our specialist teachers to be GLAD trained. Why? Because we know that sheltered instruction works and it works within our multilingual learners. So they are invited to every GLAD training that we host, every WIDA training that we host. We include our specialist teachers because we know that they are still serving that population of students for that exact reason that Dr. Johnson was just talking about.
That's great.
Yes. What is different about a two-way dual language class? If they complete the program through high school, their child will graduate with a CO by literacy. We talk about the WAC, right, and the legislation behind it from our state superintendent, and that this will assist them in applying for colleges, receiving scholarships, and again, being able to be eligible for certain jobs in the future, and that this carries weight, right, that this is very important, and that it is something to be very, very proud of as they complete all the way up to 12th grade. And we don't get into the weeds of all the testing that has to go involved into acquiring the seal by literacy. When there is a hyperlink on our pamphlet that if we share electronically, they can click and link and take them to the OSPI website and talk a little bit more about or read a little bit more about the seal by literacy. But we do say that they're eligible to take the exam even as a sophomore in high school. Obviously the goal is that they continue to stay in the program, even if they pass the exam as a sophomore, that they continue to stay in the program all the way through 12th grade, even after they know they will receive that seal by literacy. According to research, emerging bilinguals use all their linguistic resources available to them with no artificial separation of languages, knowing that, hey, what we know in one language, we know in the other, right? And so it's important that, again, we stress to our parents that it's okay, again, like Dr. Johnson was saying, that even though maybe in English right now as a kinder or first grader isn't where they need to be with the rest of their English monolingual peers, that biliteracy trajectory or projection is important for them to understand that they're at where they need to be. So we try to stress that to our parents because of that worry of they're not making the growth or the gains that, again, the rest of their peers are making. We also talk about how it's very important that there's a lot of oral language development and practice happening especially in our early grades, because of how important that is, that if they can speak it, they can think it, they can speak it, and they can write it, right? And also read it. So we talk about that. We also talk about, again, not to worry. Many parents worry that their child maybe is not acquiring English fast enough or well enough as, again, their peers. But we tell them to really avoid comparisons. Why? Because their student is receiving a very unique education that's not comparable to other children, right? We also remind them that it takes those 5 to 7 years for most of the students who are participating to be on level and actually be surpassing the rest of their peers or monolingual peers and exceeding those expectations. And then we also share with them that some are even taking college level courses in Spanish by the time they get to high school because of the rich academic instruction that they have received since kinder, right? That they feel comfortable and competent to take those high academic Spanish courses in high school if available to them. We also talk to parents about how they can stay engaged with their students. That, we also say that we also don't want them to feel that if they aren't actively engaged in a very extensive way with their children, that maybe they won't be successful in the program. We don't want them to make them feel like that. It's still our responsibility as a district, as an educators, to let that be our responsibility and determine their success in the program. Does it help? Yes, absolutely. But it's not going to be the end all make all, right? So some of the things that we ask for parents is just to stay involved in, if there is an opportunity for them to attend a school night that promotes an activity that's unique to their school or their community, if they can, to be involved in that. Also having, simple things as far as, like in this case, having a conversation with your kids, and because that goes a long way into what kind of attitudes they bring to school, and they bring to school when it comes to learning 2 languages and being bilingual and the benefits of being bilingual. So having those simple conversations with them. Also, we also talk about keeping a healthy diet. Sometimes those things are overlooked, right? And that they go a long way into how successful, again, students can be in the classroom. And we also try and do a good job of that if students are receiving a healthy meal every day.
So say, so I got something to interject right here about
Yes.
that, because I promote this stuff to all my friends, right? And they'll come at me with concerns like, well, how am I supposed to help my kid with homework?
Right.
And I don't know Spanish. What do I do? So are there ways that you, or that not you, but that Pasco provides like resources that you don't have to know the language, you can still do guided conversations and but is that explicitly discussed?
Yes, we talk about the opportunities for resources in our next slide and how they can stay informed. There is also because that's also been a bigger topic currently. This year, we took interest from all over our community into being able to maybe start some beginning or intermediate level classes in Spanish for strictly just for parents
That'd be cool.
who are interested in learning Spanish and at a level where maybe they can support their kinder and first grader at home because of the need. And so we currently offer and those classes would be in Spanish. We currently offer English classes for our Spanish speaking parents at our parent education center, but we don't have anything now for our English dominant speaking families in Spanish. And that's in the works because we understand that that's a need as we continue to expand the program. And so hopefully within here, maybe, so there is a lot of interest. And again, most of that interest is coming from the west side of our Pasco, just because of the high population of more English dominant speaking families. Other resources that we, when we talk to parents about, simple things as far as like putting words together, not what we don't want is we don't want to stress parents out that if they're not involved in some type of way or capacity, that again, it'll make that their student might not be successful. If there's anything I can stress is that we want parents to make them feel like in whatever way you can be a help to your child will go a long way. Again, whether that's them going to sleep on time, right? Having a healthy diet, having conversations with them, simple about how school went. Even if you can't provide that maybe language support, there is also tutoring at most sites that can help with that as well. I know I'm at Whittier right now elementary. There's tutoring for students that need that extra maybe language support. But it's getting in touch again with the school and the site. Many schools have a PTO, parent teacher organization that they can get involved with, or there's also an action team partnership that schools have. There's more information on the PSD app or webpage. And there's little things that happen at schools also where they follow our Facebook and Twitter or Instagram account. They can also find out. And then even there's a lot of resources at the Mid-Columbia Library as well that they can also tap into. And that's a big resource that we steer a lot of our parents to because it's free, right? And it's easily accessible if they choose, or if they are, have a chance to volunteer at their child's school. And that's it. That's what our info sessions look like at our dual language parent meetings. Questions?
Awesome. That's great. I'm just trying to imagine how this presentation looks in the different locations.
Yes.
And the different types of questions that you have to field from the Spanish speaking parents versus the English speaking parents. Have you noticed any trends in those types of questions and concerns that are expressed?
So yes, the trends that are, that we see more in our West Side schools is involving testing. And it's just, getting away from the old research and informing parents that is no longer the case, that there is no testing involved. We see that a lot, and mostly again in the west side of our community. And it goes by maybe word of mouth or friends that have had their children in the dual language program for many, many years, and that is what they experienced. Um, when it comes to the east and central side of Pasco, they're really more focused about what their students are learning. And so this is something that when we look at our English, or sorry, our time allocations, and then what they are learning in the classrooms, so that they understand that, because they're the opposite. They feel like maybe their English isn't going to get developed as well or fast enough, because the majority of their day is in Spanish, right? And a lot of our parents, maybe they're coming here from another country, are expecting their children to learn English because they still feel that maybe that is the language that holds advantage, or that is the language that it's going to help them get by. And so we try to, you know, deviate ourselves from that thinking, and to letting them know that this is what best research shows, and not to worry. So we go a little bit more deeper into that time allocation and what they will be learning within those time allocations, so that they can feel comfortable that, yes, even though your child might still start with the majority of their day in Spanish, and that is maybe the language that they predominantly, are languaging in, it's okay. And the progression of the grade levels and the content areas. So those are two trends that we've seen in our west side versus our east and central side of our community.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty common
Yeah.
nationally too.
Yes, good question. And what do we do throughout the year? Part of my job also is when we have schools that, need help or support, and maybe throughout the year, some parents might need like a brushing up of what dual language is. We do offer services to go to their buildings and sites, and we do present also at their buildings and site. We will present something similar to this, but also we will go into maybe a little bit deeper as to what maybe students are learning, depending on where they're at the school year, if there's testing season, or we also go into maybe a little bit deeper as to like what testing they will do in which language, if they have those questions that maybe they still have, or weren't answered as as best as possible by their school or their teacher. We provide that support as well for any school but what we do also want, and we encourage our schools, is to take ownership of the program and make it their own within their own school community. That's also very important, and that it isn't just something that we as a district come in and impose, and but it's organic, in that sense that it's our school, it's our community, it's our program, right? Because they know their families best, maybe more than what we do. So we also encourage our schools to do that.
So what is there an official like avenue of communication? Let's say parents don't go to the meeting, or during the year something comes up and they're thinking about it. Is there a way that they can easily find, okay, I have a question about dual language, this is where I go, that's who receives it? Is that you? Is that building specific? How do they find that information, and how to communicate with PSD?
Yes. So the first option that we have is our site. That's the very first thing we have our site. And then we also keep in contact with our student clerks and our secretaries at every school, to let them know who the point of contacts are, which would be myself, and then the director of special programs, Victor Silva. That any question or concern that isn't being able to be answered by the school, they know to contact us. Because we work very closely with our clerks and our secretaries, because when we start to send out the applications for dual language, they are our points of contact, because that's who the community sees first when they walk into their buildings. So that's
A little
very
bit,
important.
that's a little bit easier in the case of a smaller district like Finn.
Oh yes, absolutely. Here we have 18 elementary schools and our online school that it's more to manage. But yes, that's the route we take. We go with, if there's anything that we can provide online, and if not, the school then knows to contact us, and I'm the point of contact for that, and also our assistant director of special programs.
Cool. The other thing that you mentioned in our conversation last week was that you not only do these info sessions for incoming families, but you have families that have been in the program for a few years that come back and they have more questions and need a refresher, right? What kind of things or topics are mentioned by families who are like second, third grade into it versus just a novice starting?
So yes, so what we do is when we have parents like that, we go over the time allocations so that they are aware of where they're at with whatever current grade level their child is in. And then we go over the content areas that their students are learning in each language. And so I didn't put it up here, but we also have the 3, 4, and 5 dual language instructional framework. We don't show that, and that we show to them, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah.
That we show to them specifically to also freshen them up and so that they can remember, oh, okay, my son's a 4th grader now. He's going to learn math and English this year. Because and then we also we hand them out the brochure, and it looks like this. Can you guys see that? Can you guys see the brochure?
Mhm.
Okay, so let me do.
That's probably where you get a lot of questions about
Yes.
the testing, right? And
Yes,
why is
we get
my 3rd grade, my kid's behind in
yes,
English?
and we don't really talk about the biliteracy trajectory with or trajectory with our incoming kinder. We focus more with our parents who are needing that refresher, because they do have more questions that pertain to, well, my student maybe isn't making the growth that I expected him to make in his first language, which is typically in English. And so we have those conversations more with those parents who have been in the program for a couple of years already. And we go over the brochure again, because in the brochure we have this is the front page of it, and it's tri-folded. So again, they'll see the benefits of the program, what the goals are, every school that we offer dual language education, how it works, the ultimate goal of the seal biliteracy, and then the program design. And again, this is the time allocations with the content areas of what is being taught in each language. And then the 2 different models that we practice here in our district, our goals, and then how students are being placed, talking about that lottery system. So it's a good resource to have if for parents who are maybe, need a little refresher as to, okay, those are the goals, that's the program design, how it all works. And so it's just a good resource to have overall. We have it in English and we have it in Spanish right now. And we are working on translating it to our Russian bilingual families as well.
All right. That's great. So any other questions for Cesar? It could be that from a programmatic perspective that we're all involved in, or for those who are parents too, like what kind of questions do you think would come up, either that you would have, or maybe, your friends, family members?
I just had oops, sorry. Oh, sorry. We were talking at the same time.
Okay,
You go first.
Are you sure?
Yes. I
Okay.
love you.
Mine was just a clarifying question. When you're looking at like the testing scale scores that you showed us at the beginning for like reading and math, are parents given the comparison just for like students that are in the dual language pathway, or are they given sort of that performance scale for students in the whole school?
No, just for those that are in the dual language pathway.
Okay.
Yes, good question.
But that's not, Ashley, that's a super cool point. That's not to say that you couldn't do
Right.
that.
Exactly.
Right. I'm assuming that you're showing parents, look, the grade that's just the general ed class is on this trajectory.
Right.
The dual language programs like this. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can do that. I mean,
Okay.
you don't have to hide it. I think that's a really cool
Yeah, that's a good.
way to demonstrate progress, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, Janae, unless you're cuidando niños, there you go.
I was gonna say the same exact thing. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, Ashley. No, I really love your brochure that you have here. I just was thinking, from the parent aspect, because I'm a teacher along with being a mom, and having, this parent feature is really important. And I love that I just really like it a lot. I just wanted to give you kudos for that.
Yes,
awesome.
and thank you, thank you. We continue to make changes to it. And we try to put it in a way where we encompass everything, right? And it's an easy read for parents, and it's something that they could always use. The electronic version of it, we have this hyperlink here, where they can go straight into that OSPI site, and look at more information on that biliteracy or that seal of biliteracy, because that session almost needs to be just a session on its own, because there's so much information around that. We haven't received a lot of interest as far as like maybe doing that yet, because this is my second year in the position, and we're making it an emphasis to really get them interested into what is that seal by literacy or el sello de bilectoescritura. Entonces, but that's something that we've talked about, where maybe we can do a session just on that and get them even more excited.
Yeah, and that's really neat, because then you start talking about the benefits beyond academic progress and bilingualism, by
Right.
literacy. It's like, hey, well, this is a credential then that you can list on your resume, and
Absolutely.
so yeah, that's great.
Yes, thank you.
¿Qué más? Amy, do you have any thoughts?
No, I just enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I know it was a little long. Typically, and I will say that typically we reserve an hour. We reserve an hour to go over. Sometimes it extends because of questions, but that's just a general rule of thumb. We do about an hour when we host these presentations for parents.
And then you also mentioned that, like, if somebody you do multiple, right? So obviously different
Yes.
families can't
Yes,
access
so
it because of their
absolutely.
schedule.
Yes, we will do a session in West Pasco. We will do a session in Central Pasco, and then we'll do a session in East Pasco, and then we'll do a Zoom session as well. So we'll host 4 sessions so that parents from all over the community can go, and even online as an option. Just because what we went through with COVID, it was a way for us to still reach parents. Yes, and then we will also hold we hold this exact same presentation in Espanol as well. If we see that the majority of the parents there are Spanish speaking, we prepare mostly when we go to our Central and East Side Pasco or schools in Espanol, and our Zoom session and our West Side presentation typically are in English. If there are parents who are present that are only Spanish speaking, I will do the presentation in los dos idiomas.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't have to be. So I'm on the west side of Pasco. If I miss it, I can still attend one of the other ones. And
Yes,
the Zoom option's great.
yes,
Now that families are used to that. So, but it's multiple points of opportunities.
yes. Throughout the summer, we'll host 4 sessions throughout the summer, and again, if schools ask us, we will come to their schools throughout the year as well.
That might be a good idea. Have like a halftime check-in or something.
Yes, I know McClintock this past year did that. So we went out and we did that for our parents, and we had a better turnout just because, like Dr. Johnson was saying, there were parents who had already been in the program for a couple of years who wanted that refresher. So there was a lot more participation in that halfway point or check that we had with McClintock STEM Elementary, as opposed to just having that initial for parents who are initiating or just starting in the program throughout the summer. We still get a decent turnout, but it was a bigger turnout for definitely when it was in the middle of the school year.
That's great, just to provide that, that option.
Yes.
That's definitely something I would be supporting. But Cool. Well, Cesar, I know we took up a lot of your time too, but we really appreciate all the information. As we kind of distill out everything that we're trying to do, this is going to be a big part of, our approach. And so I will definitely be following up with you.
Yes, and I'm happy to
and-
help, anything I can help or assist with, and ideas or anything, please let me know. I'm willing and able to, so I'm excited for you guys.
That's fantastic. Can you just maybe turn that do that PowerPoint into a PDF and then just email it to me like
Yes.
that, and
Yeah,
at
and
least give us an idea.
I'll do that here before I check out. I'll do that now.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay, so you're good to go, Cesar.
Okay,
We're just
thank
gonna
you,
follow
guys.
up and we'll be in contact soon, okay?
All right. Have a great night. Thank you, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Adios.
All right. What did you think about any ideas that he shared that would apply to our context?
I think for me, both from what he said and what was in the chapter, is that importance of having that liaison with the community who really has that task of making sure that everyone gets the information that they need, making sure that we're checking in with our families. And I know particularly a lot of our families out here who are predominantly Spanish speaking, when I've talked to them in conferences, they've expressed worries that like they feel like they can't help their kids enough really in either language because they didn't necessarily have a lot of an education before they moved here. And so having that person really help reaffirm for them that you don't have to be a math expert to be able to like come to these workshops and learn some ways to help your student with math in either or both languages. And I think that in our community is going to be a really important role.
Yeah, and so what's neat about that insight is so the English speaking parents start to feel the anxiety that the Spanish speaking parents have felt for years, right? Of, oh my God, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to, but the idea is to provide guidance on how to help your students, even if you don't know the content, even if you don't know, right, all the technical vocabulary, there's still those guiding practices that we can provide for them. So that's going to be part of it, right? Don't worry if you don't know, right, trigonometry in Spanish. You can still have a good conversation and support your students. Yeah, that's a really neat one. Offering Spanish classes to the English speaking parents. They've been doing the English ESL classes for the families like for years, but that's the first time I've heard of that. That's pretty neat. I mean, we got to find out where we're going to get all the funding for these kind of things, right, Amy? So I just the chapter was super brief, which I appreciated, but it had neat ideas that we can play with here. So we just had our graduation this weekend, and so this was one of my students she's from Walla Walla. I tried to get her to come over, Amy. I was trying hard. She's phenomenal, but that this is on a deeper level. Her hat says it all. She's the product of sacrifice, and so the families who are of the multilingual students, our communication to them is going to be around, this program benefits and will benefit their kids even more than just having a gen ed type of experience. And the parents, the Spanish speaking parents just need to be reassured that they didn't go through all the stuff that they've experienced for their son or daughter not to get a good education, not to learn English, and those are things that I hear all the time. So the English speaking parents, it's actually probably a little easier to twist their arm and say, hey, give it a shot, look at this. And so you have to have it both ways. I kind of grouped the topics covered in those pages so that we could think about, what does it mean for Findlay, right? So how do we get staff, faculty, administrators to start seeing, their students in terms of an asset-based, mind frame, which I haven't seen pushes back against that, but that's a fundamental tenet. Okay. How do we get teachers on board who might not be a part of the dual language program, but to get them to understand that the whole school, each grade band, even though one's gen ed, still part of the bigger picture, and to use those similar practices that are culturally and linguistically sound for their students as well. The programming, like what can we offer parents? Like, I don't know, Amy, what kind of programming is offered for parents in Findlay currently? Doesn't have to be related to dual language. Classes, PTO, volunteering. I mean,
They can do volunteering. They can do, it's called the PTG, the parent teacher group. There's also, we do a thing called Reset Families. This is a parent education night. We do Title I family workshops. We also have had a series of like art nights that in Findlay Middle School, we branched it out to the other buildings with high cap, but if we have spots, we can open it up to other people. Trying to think of what they do. Resource fairs at the different buildings. The middle school does, was it pyramid night or something like that, or Egypt night? There's different things each year. The open house pieces to engage the parents. I don't know, maybe the teachers can add more. I don't know. I know I'm forgetting things.
That's a long list. That's great. Does Findlay usually get a lot of participation and support from families in the community for those different events?
Certain events are widely attended. For one, sports. People like the sports out here. It's really
Yeah.
popular. Our back to school / open house events are widely attended. Conferences in the fall are widely attended. We really springboard off of that as much as we can. If we do a random workshop, depends what it is. Typically, it's not as widely attended. However, if we do personal invites, depends what it is. Personal invites, then we will. Our Reset Families wasn't widely attended. That's like 7 or 8 sessions over a span of several weeks. But the ones that went there found it really helpful. So different things are attended more widely. So when we want to get information out or we want surveys, we try to couple it with the things that we know are widely attended, like our fall parent teacher conference for Title I information. For example, we like to disseminate that time because we know have most of our parents attend that.
Yeah, and so variety of opportunities, which is great. The messaging, and Ashley, what you were saying connects us. The messaging, if that breaks down, then everything breaks down. And and I don't know how we'll figure that out, like who's going to be that liaison person and what does that entail. But Findlay's small enough where it should be really manageable to have one-on-one direct relationships with the families. My wife and I do it's a family reading program for Mid-Columbia Library. It's super cool. I love it. It's called Primetime Literacy. But so families come and they have dinner, and then we read a couple books and have really deep discussions about the topics, social justice or depression or immigration or you name it. It's super neat. And then the kids take the books home for the next week and read them. And it's modeling for parents how to read, but have broader discussions. We've done it, I don't know, 8 times in the past 5 or 6 years. And it's always just packed, right? Because part of that program is Mid-Columbia Libraries has a point person, and it's connected to a school. And that point person follows up with the families. And this last session, so there are 6 weeks, once a week. And we had one family show up the first 3 weeks, at least. There was consistency, and that to me was, we're going to meet this week and talk through what happened, but it's because of the messaging.
Mhm.
And that has never happened in any of the session or any, the past few years, but there needs to be a better way to communicate other than you blast it out on Class Dojo, right? You got to have that person, and that's going to be a huge factor for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how I'm seeing it. But then the other thing is having for our dual language, when we keep ramping it up, we need to have an advisory committee in some capacity. We're fortunate because we have staff in the district who are parents as well. It'd be nice to get somebody who's not related to, well, I guess everybody's related to the district, but who doesn't work for the district and can be a voice of questioning and wanting to know. That then is going to help us develop our communication strategies and the information. And that's why with CESAR, and I asked them, the whole team, that like, what are the questions the parents ask? What are the biggest things? And it might be different in Findlay. They might ask different questions. I don't know. I mean, it's different when you don't have to worry about all the different transportation and all that stuff. So the overcoming barriers is, I mean, there's going to be challenges and barriers, but when we start looking at the partnerships that you make, and then the avenues of communication and the effort, the barriers are usually easier to overcome than like trying to adopt and learn a new curriculum. So this is the part, like it's like teacher recruitment. I'm very comfortable in this space because it seems to be just getting people familiar with each other and the program. But yeah, so I'm super excited about this step and having people involved. That's why we're going to try to figure out what we'll do for the community forum and how we get input from families. That's what we're going to work on next time, and the messaging that has to take place. And that is going to be our first step to getting interest and excitement and some buy-in. So I don't know if you have any other ideas about specific challenges, barriers, or resources that Findlay has. From the list of things that you already said, there's a lot we can work with there instead of inventing new things, right? So having a liaison is great. You might have, does Findlay have a home visitor or home visitors at each level? Probably don't. It's probably not as necessary because of the size. When you have, do you have staff, administrative assistants reach out and as well to families, or is it on the teachers and administrators? Like any given family, are they aware that different people might be calling them, or how does that work?
We have communities in schools. Are you familiar?
Mm-hmm.
So we have that. We've got counselors.
Okay.
We've got our teachers, principals, counselors, communities and schools. We've got an engagement and attendance specialist,
Okay.
but that's through the ESD. But they're here. Trying to think of what else we have. We've got 21st Century, who helps with parent outreach, and we've got Gear Up, who can also help. But Gear Up is specific to certain grade levels.
Yeah, they follow them through.
But our 21st Century, we've got at elementary and middle, and they partner with us. They're very helpful.
Yeah, but it's also grant funded too. Maybe that's a way to get something up and running. And what we want to do is build in a sustainable structure, right? And so the person doesn't necessarily need to be consistent for multiple years, but it would be nice where if we could get a full-time Findlay person, and that, or maybe a couple like counselors, I like that, who parents know, and they know who to reach out to. And and it might be that at first we do lean on 21st Century or community and schools, those kind of programs, but
For questions on this, it would be me.
Yeah,
This would be me. Um,
but the parents aren't like, hey, what's Amy McLaughlin's extension and calling you, or do they?
no, they would be calling the school and then the secretaries would tell them to call me.
What if they're they don't speak English?
We
Or-
have in all of our buildings, so that's where they help.
Mhm.
So we've got one of my district bilingual secretary. I share her with the elementary principal. So she helps with that. We've got 2 bilingual secretaries at the elementary. We've got 1 bilingual secretary at the elementary. Dolia's bilingual. She's up here with me. She's not my secretary, but she can help. And then Marcy, our other fiscal assistant, is bilingual. And then our communities and schools are bilingual. And so
Yeah,
we've got people to help, but they do. And then some of our paras are bilingual. I will tell you that, and I don't know if Janae is still on, but they very much are comfortable with like Lily, who Janae's para speaks Spanish. So they're going to go to those people
right.
generally first, and they're comfortable with the elementary secretary. So they have certain people, Janae's there, that they just the relationships that they already have built that they would go to.
That that was my bigger point. Like we need to establish some folks that have that confianza or that trust, right, with the families, and we don't want to overburden anybody. But if we have like a family outreach team or something, just that a hub where parents can get them, and then it might trickle to you or whoever, whatever concern it is, but somebody that's competent enough in the dual language that they know how to answer questions before it escalates, or yeah. I don't know. I this is exciting. This stuff's easy to me, but it's it also can make or break the system. And we'll be creative about how we do that. I'm looking forward to we're not having a guest speaker next time because I want to spend time digging into, all right, here's how we're going to get some input from families.
Yeah, that'll be a good topic. And I'm hoping that we have good ideas. Ashley and Janae will need you on there because we need some ways. How do we what can we do to get that input from parents?
Right.
Because you guys know that can be a struggle. The 2 of them know better than anybody that's a struggle unless we have direct conversations with them. That can be very, very hard. We just put something on Facebook we may not hear. We send a flyer we may not hear.
Right.
I sent a survey evaluating our program to 200 and how many? Like 200 families, got 1 back. And it was a stamped envelope. So like we don't, unless I think it's really those personal invites. This is where we're struggling. We struggle across the board with any communication though. Like I really have to utilize our people that do have relationships with with the families to help get the word out. Because that non-personal isn't working here
No,
in Finley, not
doesn't
at
work with
all.
me. We get solicited so much as parents.
Yeah.
But and then we don't have to get every parent, right? We can sample and do just a few, right? But like sit down with them and have your people say, hey, this is really important. Can you give us some help with this? And getting feedback from 10 families that we were able to engage personally, or maybe even invite them to a session or something, that's way more valuable than sending something out to 300 and getting 1 back. I don't know, maybe we can think about also incentivizing with a gas card or a Walmart card. I don't know what kind of money, or what kind of limitations there are on the grant stuff, but if we could get some sort of, hey, if you come in, we've got a $25 Walmart card or gas card.
I don't know that we can do that because it'll be like gifting with public funds. But like for the example, like the teachers, if we could, the elementary teachers, maybe we could say certain funds we could do. I'd have to ask Brian, like basic ed, you could do like a candy or a treat or something like that. Like, if we get the teachers to pass out something, the kids bring it back, like they could get extra credit maybe in secondary, or they could get, I don't know how many people do extra credit in elementary, or a little treat or a little positive gram or something like that. I think there's ways Ashley and Janae would be better at
I was
helping
just
the.
I was just gonna interject if that's okay, me.
Mhm.
I was going to mention that I was actually thinking the same thing, Eric. That's kind of been my challenge is um you know, and it is definitely with Finley because just the parent, the parental aspect of it, and that's a challenge I'm facing with the bilingual program. Is I wish, you know, I'd like to have more parental involvement with
Mhm.
them being more involved in what's going on in the program. Like I truly don't think they understand like what our program does and what it offers, and I think you know they don't look like me being a parent. I'm going to be really honest. A lot of parents don't look at the papers. What they get more is the text messages and the instant message that they can quickly read to see if it's important or not. And
Right.
so one is having like a parent night and having, like you said, an incentive to come is like food. So the big one is like free childcare, like free food, free desserts.
We can
And
do
then
that.
that's where you would have like a survey of like what can we do to get communication out and do better. And then another one like I bounced off Amy is just having, could we do a parent app and have it in, Spanish to let them know, you know just any important things in the school that's going on, because I feel like that language barrier, there's a disconnect. But I
Yeah.
don't know if Amy can, or Ashley can agree to that. I just feel like there's a
Oh
huge
yeah.
disconnect there.
Huge.
And I just I want parents to know, especially our multilingual parents, because we have more than one language. But I just want them to know they're valued, and that it's important to us.
I think too that, from doing our home visits, they definitely want to participate. Um, but it's about, we get parents come in and see the presentations. We didn't even ask them to come in. They want to know if they could come in,
Yeah.
and so it's a matter of involving them. But I don't know if sometimes if it's a cultural difference in, I think they don't, like the ones I've talked to in the past, they are more comfortable. There's a barrier with the language. They enjoy having a Spanish speaking secretary because there is a barrier, and they don't know how to ask the teacher for help. This is just at some of the events when I've been talking to parents. They want to be involved, but they don't know how and they don't know what. And so it's sometimes what we think they wouldn't want to do, they want to do, and vice versa. So it's and there are some cultural differences there.
Mhm.
Maybe you'd know better than me, but I remember one of our middle school teachers, something about taking materials back and forth. Are you familiar with that at all?
Hmm.
A cultural thing?
About taking stuff back and forth.
Yeah, from home to school.
Keep filling me in.
I don't know. I got to ask the middle school teacher, but there was some kind of issue with the parents weren't, I don't know where they were from, but not comfortable with the kid taking stuff to back and forth.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what, and just things like but the amount of involvement and what they feel they can question or how to ask for help, like they don't know. We get that same feedback of, I wish you offered classes for us to learn English. We get that same feedback. But we've got resources, but how do we let them know what the resources are? I think what big thing is, like Janae said, is getting feedback. We and maybe it does need to be focus group, like getting this feedback from the parents and really it's always, I think, an age old problem of practice is getting feedback from those parents that you seem to get it from certain parents who are really involved. you're gonna get that feed just in general, like in
Yeah,
our
that's
home.
self-selected though. You're right. We
And
gotta
but
get it
how
from
do you get it
others.
from those other ones that aren't as involved that you want to get involved? And I believe that everybody wants to be involved, but it's a matter of figuring that piece out, like
Mhm.
what matching things that they could do. I wasn't expecting that they'd ask if they can come in and watch the presentations. Of course, we were like, yeah, come on in. That's great. We didn't ask them to do that. We didn't put that stipulation on, but they want to be there. I just think they don't know what's okay. And sometimes I don't know that they can communicate with the teacher. I don't know how Ashley feels about it. They
Yeah,
just,
I think the same thing, like a lot of them in conferences, when we have that translator there, and potentially also because of my role in ELD, a lot of these families that are needing translation have been working with me in particular for like 4 years now. So they know who I am. They've had me involved in conferences. I had a lot of these kids in my class last year too. And so they have developed that comfort level where even though there is a translator, they're comfortable telling me these things
Yeah.
because they've been working with me for so long. But I see like a lot of parents too, they bring up, like, I had a lot talking about issues with the schedule and why does our school start so much earlier than other schools in the area and stuff like that. And I said, well, that's a valid point. And we're talking about schedules and maybe doing balanced calendar at the district office. So you should go to the district meetings and say, hey, board, I'm for this. And I would also like to add, can we start our school day later? Because my kids need more sleep, and the way that our work schedules are, we
They
don't
get out too early and then I gotta
right.
leave and yep.
And so they're sharing these things with me, but they don't know how to go beyond me sorry, lights turned off, beyond me saying, please take it to the district office. Like, they don't know then how to do that. And is there a translator at those monthly meetings with the school board where they could go and share their thoughts and their opinions? And I think part of it too, like in addition to getting their involvement and getting a focus group and getting their information, is also creating more sort of at a district level, what's going on everywhere that's accessible to them. Because like for me, like, yes, I use Class Dojo because it will translate into English and Spanish, but I still see like only a few of my Spanish speaking parents who will message me on Dojo. They're comfortable replying to me if I've sent them something, but they usually don't take that initiative to say, hey, so-and-so said, blah, 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 what's going on with that? Or can I help or whatever? So
it's that
I think
two-way.
that's part of it too. Yeah.
We have a one-way. Molly from ESC has been helping us with the newsletter, which they can
Mhm.
sign up to get it on their phone, and then it's on the website. It's on Facebook and it'll translate it for them. But we don't have a system built in place at the district level for that two-way, like what
So-
she's saying.
Yeah, and for me, I get a ton of, like, we're on Dojo here and it's just like constant, messages, and to know not only you get messages, but then to figure out how to reply can be tricky for some parents. And I think our what I've seen as successful is you get prominent parents, community member, right? Parents who you can form a parent council, a parent advisory council, or call them parent senators or family senators or something, where the information goes from them then back to the community, and they become that two-way vehicle, right? And you meet once a month and their voice counts, and you make it an official thing. And Kennewick's really good at that. Pasco's got this huge system, the parent advisory council, and
We've got one through our migrant bilingual program.
yeah, so we
That's
can
what we've got. It's
we
called
can
PAC.
pump that up, right? And
Yeah.
use that, so it's not a new thing, but use that as our vehicle and have them go get info, like when they're at a carne asada or a barbecue on the weekends. Hey, ask your friends what they think about this, and then when they come back, they tell you. And it's just it's all it's relational. The way we communicate as schools is so mechanical. versus having a relationship with the folks who then have relationships. And then, there's church settings and there's all sorts of stuff you can tap into once we get up and running. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I've got a jam. I appreciate you spending the extra few minutes so we could debrief, but keep these points in your mind. So when we meet next time, we have a way that we're going to use to get some input, right? That we
Yes.
can support our recommendation. Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Really appreciate the extra time. Okay. So we will see you soon.
Okay. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.